Darius Miller always woke before the town. He liked the hour when the streets still belonged to sprinklers and stray cats, when the only sound was his breath and the slap of his shoes. He tied them the way he always did: double knot, tug, tuck, feeling the familiar ridge where the left sole had been patched with shoe glue and stubbornness. The shoes weren't pretty, but they had carried him through grief, through layoffs, through winters that bit skin raw. They would carry him today. The Cedar Valley Marathon started near the river, where a line of sponsor tents turned the park into a marketplace. Energy gels, foam rollers, limited edition caps priced like rent. Floodlights threw white pools onto the grass. Volunteers in orange vests arranged barricades and waved runners toward corrals marked with big letters. The loudspeakers played a playlist that had too much brass for this early in the morning. Darius clipped his bib, number 1784, to his singlet and joined the shuffle toward bag drop. He didn't know anyone here. Most of the local run club folks ran 10Ks and posted about it all week. Marathon people were a different breed, grimmer, more superstitious. He heard their pre-race rituals in fragments: the beet juice shot, the lucky socks, the flat runner laid out on the hotel carpet like a paper doll. First one? A man beside him asked. Tall, lean, pale as the morning, he had a $300 carbon pair dangling from one finger like a prop. First here, Darius said, not first. The man's eyes dipped to Darius's shoes, a smirk. Vintage. Respect, his friend laughed without looking up from his watch. You going for the fun run or the whole distance? Whole, Darius said. Big talk. The friend's tone wasn't playful. Corral A's up there, fellas, he added loudly to his group, like a coach calling his starters. As they moved off, Darius caught one last comment thrown over his shoulder. Hope the charity bus isn't full? He let it slide past him. He'd trained on hills that didn't care what anyone thought. Besides, he'd heard worse at the warehouse, at the bank, at the supermarket, where a security guard once followed him for 3 aisles and then told him to have a blessed day. At the gear check, a volunteer with gray braids and a smile that reached her eyes handed him a safety pin he didn't need. You look ready, baby, she said, soft as a hymn. Run your race. He nodded thanks. He couldn't fit into words. The sky lifted from navy to slate. Breath turned visible. Runners jogged figure eights to wake up their calves. Darius did his routine. 10 knee lifts, ankle circles, 3 deep squats. 2 strides that opened his chest like a window. The familiar calm came late this morning, arriving in pieces. He'd slept poorly, dreaming of starting guns with no sound. He checked his watch. The numbers stared back without judgment. He reminded himself what Coach Alvarez always said, back when he could afford a track club. Stay honest to your pace. Let them burn their sugar early. Your engine is diesel. He missed Alvarez's whistle and the way the man snapped gum when he was pleased. He missed a lot of things, but he had this. He drifted toward Corral B. His projected finish time put him there, and found himself again near the smirking pair. They stood with a little pack of matching singlets, the kind of crew that trained together and finished together and toasted with craft beer together. One of them pointed discreetly like a kid in church, and Darius felt heat crawl up his neck. He stared ahead past them to the inflatable arch that read START in thick, cheerful letters. Spectators lined the fence already, huddled in parkas and clutching paper cups. A boy perched on his dad's shoulders waved a homemade sign. Run fast, eat pancakes. Darius smiled. Another kid, maybe 8, caught his eye and waved shyly. Darius waved back. The kid's mother glanced at Darius, then at his shoes, then tugged the boy's hand down. Save it, she murmured, not quite under her breath. The announcer's voice cracked over the PA. Good morning, Cedar Valley. 26.2 miles of glory ahead. Remember to seed yourselves properly and have fun out there. Pace groups, please raise your signs. Pace leaders hoisted their balloons. 310, 320, 330. Darius moved toward 310, ambitious for most, ordinary for the men who had scoffed at him. He'd run faster alone in training, chasing the ghost of himself along the river path. But training miles are private currency. Race day is taxes. He closed his eyes for a moment and pictured the course map he'd memorized. The gentle incline in mile 3, the crosswind on the bridge at 8, the mean little hill just before 20 that tripped folks who hadn't saved enough. He pictured the turn to Main Street, where the finish line would look close and feel far. He pictured his mother's kitchen table and the glass jar where she used to drop coins and say, "For the you yet to come." He'd use that jar to pay the race fee. "Yo," someone said at his elbow. A black runner in a faded college singlet nodded at Darius with a grin. "Don't see many of us out here." "You good?" "Good," Darius said, surprised how much the words steadied him. "Name's Lionel," the man said. "Stick to your splits. Let the peacocks strut. Mile 20 sorts 'em." They bumped fists. The simple fact of Lionel's presence stitched a rip he hadn't known was there. A horn blared in the distance for the wheelchair division. The corrals shifted forward, an animal waking. Knees bounced. Watches beeped as runners locked their GPS. The smell of menthol rub and nervous stomachs climbed into the air. "Remember," the announcer said, "run the mile you're in." The smirking duo started a call and response chant with their crew. Inside jokes, something about King. Darius looked at the arch again, at the white letters that didn't care who read them. He rolled his shoulders. He touched the patch on his left shoe like a good luck medal. "You belong at the line," he told himself, "not for the first time and not for the last. The road takes anyone willing to meet it." The national anthem ended. A hush held for a heartbeat, all that human energy funneling into stillness. The gun cracked. The pack surged. For the first few steps, Darius felt the crowd's shove, the elbows and eagerness. Then the sound sorted itself into a rhythm. Rubber on asphalt, lungs drawing in cold, 1,000 heartbeats finding tempo. He tucked in behind the 310 balloons, not chasing, not bracing, just settling. The mockers sprinted ahead as if the finish were around the corner. Let them. As he crossed the timing mat, the chip at his shoe chirped and his watch vibrated. Race started. Darius lifted his eyes to the thin line of sunrise over the river. The town would wake to police motorcycles and cowbells, and his name read off a spreadsheet at the halfway split. Some would cheer, some would look past him. That was all noise. He found the quiet inside the noise, the place where his stride clicked and the world narrowed to the length of the next breath. He ran his mile. The pack surged like a living tide, hundreds of legs pumping, arms slicing, feet striking the pavement in chaotic rhythm. For a few breathless moments, Darius was swallowed in it. A body among bodies, numbers flashing on bibs, sweatbands bouncing, shoes squeaking against damp asphalt. The adrenaline tempted him to push harder, to match the reckless energy around him. But he resisted. "Relax into it," he reminded himself, his coach's old mantra echoing in his mind. "Don't fight the crowd. Let the first mile come to you." The road sloped gently upward past the riverbank. Darius kept his gaze level, shoulders loose, strides even. He breathed in for 3 steps, out for 2, the rhythm steadying his nerves. The sun had just begun to crest the rooftops, painting the windows of downtown in streaks of fire. Around him, conversations rose and fell, nervous chatter, laughter, boasts disguised as jokes. "Gonna break 3 hours easy," a man bragged just ahead, slapping his friend's back. "Hope you stretched, old man," the friend replied, grinning. But when they noticed Darius just behind them, their expressions shifted. One tilted his head toward him, muttering loudly enough to carry, "He won't last 5 miles in those things." The other snorted, adding, "Bet he's never run more than a fun run." They laughed, leaning into their pace. Darius let them go. Their words stung, but they weren't new. He focused on the slap of his shoes against the ground, on the way the air cooled his lungs. He reminded himself that marathons weren't won in the first mile. Spectators crowded the sidewalks, waving neon signs, cowbells clanging. A college student in face paint shouted, "Go! Go! Go!" while 2 little girls held up a cardboard poster with glitter letters, "Run like you stole something." Their parents laughed as runners grinned at the sign. When Darius passed, the laughter quieted, and the sign lowered just slightly, as if the joke suddenly sat heavier. But then, on the opposite side, an elderly woman in a red windbreaker rang a small brass bell furiously as Darius came by. You got this, son, she called, her voice bright and proud, directed squarely at him. He felt the sound burrow deep, louder than the jeers. He nodded, grateful, and pressed forward. Half a mile in, the road flattened. The sprinting jokers who had exploded off the line were already breathing too hard, their shoulders stiff. Darius glided past them without looking, his pace unchanged. One of them sneered, "Don't get comfortable, man. We'll see you at the wall." Darius didn't answer. He didn't need to. His race wasn't with them. It was with the whisper in his own head, the one that asked every few steps, "Do you belong here?" He tightened the knot of focus in his chest, let the doubt pass like wind through branches, and kept running. When his watch beeped at the first mile marker, he glanced down. 7:11. Smooth, controlled, right on plan. A quiet smile tugged at his lips. The marathon had only just begun, and he was exactly where he needed to be. By mile 7, the field had thinned. The first rush of adrenaline was gone, and the pack had stretched into lines and pockets. Small groups of friends running together, loners like Darius who kept their rhythm, and stragglers already regretting their early pace. The course bent through Cedar Valley's neighborhoods, where residents lined their driveways with folding chairs, thermoses of coffee steaming in the cool morning air. Spectators waved signs, shouted encouragement, rang cowbells. Some clapped politely for everyone. Others cheered only when they recognized someone's name on a bib. But Darius felt the difference, not in volume, but in the weight of their gazes. A little boy in a Spider-Man hoodie waved at him with both arms, grinning wide. Darius's heart lifted. He raised a hand and waved back. But the boy's father tugged the child's hand down sharply. "Not him," the man muttered, voice carrying just enough for Darius to hear. The sting of it burned hotter than the sun on his shoulders. He looked away, jaw tightening, and fixed his eyes on the road ahead. Not everyone turned away. A group of college students held a banner scrawled with marker, "Stronger than yesterday." When they spotted Darius, one girl leaned forward over the barricade, cupping her hands around her mouth. "You're flying, man! Keep it up!" Her energy cut through the static of doubt, and Darius nodded, breath too precious to waste on thanks. The miles ticked by. At mile 9, a cluster of children handed out paper cups of water. Darius slowed just enough to grab one, gulping half and pouring the rest over his head. As the cold rivulets traced down his face, he heard laughter from a group of men at a grill set up in their yard. "Guy's already drowning," one said. "Won't make it past the bridge." He let the words pass. He had learned that sometimes silence was its own kind of defiance. Then, at mile 10, something shifted. A woman with silver hair, bundled in a red windbreaker, rang a cowbell so furiously it drowned out the jeers. Her voice carried across the street, warm and commanding. "You got this, son. Run your race." Darius turned his head, and for the briefest moment, their eyes locked. In hers, he saw no doubt, no mockery, only recognition, as though she'd known all along that he belonged here. The knot in his chest loosened. He straightened his back, lengthened his stride, and felt a surge of strength ripple through his legs. The crowd's noise blurred into a background hum, half cheer, half judgment. But one voice rose above it all. Hers, still ringing in his ears. "Run your race." And so he did. By mile 15, the race had changed. The wide smiles and playful chatter that had carried so many runners through the early miles were gone. The air now held only the sound of strained breathing, the slap of heavy shoes, the occasional cough. The sun, higher and harsher, pressed down like an invisible hand. Darius felt the heat rising in his body, the sweat soaking through his singlet, the salt crusting at the corners of his mouth. Every runner hits it, he reminded himself. The invisible wall between confidence and collapse. But he also knew this was where marathons began to tell the truth. The men who had mocked him earlier were still visible ahead, though not far. Their jokes had dried up, their shoulders hunched, their steps sloppy. He could hear their ragged breaths when the wind carried sound backward. As Darius drew closer, one turned his head, eyes narrowing. "Don't get cocky," the man spat, his words dripping with exhaustion more than menace. Darius didn't respond. His answer was in the steady rhythm of his stride, in the quiet control of his breathing. He passed them without looking back, the sound of their labored grunts fading behind him. But his own body wasn't free from rebellion. A sharp stitch jabbed under his ribs. His quads trembled with each incline. Doubt crept in, soft and persistent. What if they're right? What if you don't belong here? What if you're only proving their point? He thought of the boy whose father pulled him away. He thought of the laughter at his shoes. The weight of it pressed on him heavier than the miles. Then, as he climbed a long hill near mile 16, something broke through the fog. A group of high school students, cross-country jerseys still on from their morning practice, cheered at the barricades. "That's it! Stay smooth! You're strong, man, you're strong," one shouted, pumping his fists. Their voices weren't polished, weren't scripted. They were raw belief, and they were for him. Darius clenched his fists, his stride faltering for a heartbeat, then snapping back. 1 mile at a time, he told himself. You've trained for this. The bridge loomed at mile 17, wind whipping across its span. Many runners cursed as gusts shoved against them, but Darius leaned into it, remembering early mornings on the river path where headwinds had been his only companion. The rhythm returned, heavy but unbroken. By the time he stepped off the bridge, the pack had thinned again. He was no longer in the middle. He was among the front. The realization startled him, gave him a jolt of electricity that ran deeper than fatigue. Yes, his body ached. Yes, the doubt whispered. But he had pushed past the breaking point, and he was still running, still standing. And now, others were beginning to fall. By mile 20, the marathon had thinned to shadows. The chatter was gone, the half-smiles erased. Each runner was now locked inside their own private battle, lungs against air, muscle against gravity, spirit against surrender. The crowd lining Main Street could see it too. This was where the race stopped looking like fitness and started looking like survival. Darius's legs felt like stone columns, heavy and unyielding, but still they moved. Every step struck the pavement with dull finality, his calves screaming, his hamstrings threatening to seize. He sipped from his bottle at the last aid station, the water lukewarm but life-saving. He swirled it in his mouth, spat, then drank. The ritual of someone who knew that even swallowing could be strategy. Ahead, the lead group had splintered. 2 men clung desperately to their pace, faces twisted with effort. One, tall and broad, tried to surge but faltered, his stride buckling as though invisible weights dragged at his ankles. The other pressed on, but the gap between them and Darius was shrinking, inch by inch, mile by mile. Spectators who had been cheering casually now leaned forward, their voices sharper, eyes narrowing on the unexpected runner closing in. "Who is that guy?" someone asked, their voice rising above the crowd. "Doesn't look like he belongs up front," another muttered. But others cheered, louder now. "Go, man! Stay strong! You got this!" The shift was subtle but growing. The crowd was beginning to see him, not as background, not as an outsider, but as a contender. Still, doubt gnawed at Darius. His lungs burned, every inhale a knife, every exhale a plea. His shoes slapped against the asphalt, the patched sole holding but threatening to betray him with each strike. He imagined the mockers behind him, still sneering, waiting for him to collapse to prove them right. He thought of his mother's jar of coins. He thought of Lionel's fist bump at the start. He thought of the elderly woman's cowbell, of the boy who waved before being pulled away. And then he thought of the finish line. He pictured the banner stretched across Main Street, the timing clock glowing red, the crowd roaring as someone, maybe him, broke the tape. His heart surged against his ribs, pumping fire through tired veins. He gritted his teeth, lengthened his stride, and let the pain burn. Because pain was temporary. But the finish line would last forever. The world had narrowed to a tunnel. Darius could hear the crowd, but it was muffled, like applause through water. His own breath filled his ears, ragged, desperate, but steady enough to keep him moving. Every muscle screamed for him to stop, but something deeper, something older than pride, older than pain, pushed him forward. The runner ahead of him staggered, His arms flailed for balance, his stride collapsing into a shuffle. The man had led most of the race, soaking up cheers and cameras, but now his body betrayed him. The wall had caught him, hard. As Darius pulled alongside, the man cursed under his breath, eyes wild with disbelief. Darius didn't gloat. He didn't glance sideways. He just kept moving, one step, then another, his focus fixed on the strip of white banner in the distance. The finish line. The crowd saw it happening. A ripple of shock spread like fire through dry grass. "Who is that?" voices shouted. "Where did he come from? Look at him! He's taking the lead!" Children perched on their parents' shoulders. Cowbells clanged, and a chant began somewhere on the left side of the street. "Go! Go! Go!" It spread, awkward at first, then stronger, until the entire block roared with it. For a moment, Darius felt his body lift. The fatigue was still there, the knives in his lungs, the fire in his quads. But the roar carried him, cradled him, demanded he keep going. His patched shoes struck the pavement like drums of defiance. The final 100 yards stretched like a lifetime. The banner loomed closer, but every step slowed time itself. He could see the clock overhead, numbers flashing in relentless red. His vision blurred, sweat stung his eyes, but he clenched his fists and drove harder. 50 yards. The sound of the crowd swelled into a thunder that shook his bones. 20 yards. His chest felt ready to split open. 10 yards. He could see the tape across the road, trembling in the hands of race officials. Then, with one final surge, a burst pulled from every mile he had ever run in the dark, every jeer he had ever swallowed, every doubt he had ever fought. Darius crossed the line. The tape broke across his chest. The crowd erupted. For a heartbeat, silence fell inside him, as though the world had stopped. Then came the rush. The applause, the cameras flashing, the announcer's voice cracking with disbelief. "Ladies and gentlemen, your winner, Darius Miller." The same people who had mocked him, doubted him, dismissed him, now shouted his name. Some with awe, some with shame. But none could ignore him. He bent over, hands on his knees, lungs heaving, sweat pouring. His body trembled, on the edge of collapse. But inside, something unbreakable stood tall. He hadn't just finished. He hadn't just won. He had crossed a line no laughter could erase. The finish line quieted faster than Darius expected. The noise of the crowd still buzzed around him. Cheers, clapping, cowbells ringing. But inside, he felt a strange calm, a stillness that came after the storm. Volunteers rushed to him, draping a crinkling foil blanket over his shoulders, pressing a bottle of water into his hand. The medal, heavy, gleaming, was placed around his neck. "Congratulations, champ," one of the officials said, eyes wide as though he still couldn't quite believe it. Reporters pushed microphones toward his face, cameras flashing. "Where do you train?" one asked. "Who's your sponsor?" another demanded. "What brand are those shoes?" someone shouted, voice edged with disbelief. Darius smiled faintly. He lifted one patched shoe, scarred and stained from countless miles. "These?" "Just mine," he said simply. "You don't need the best shoes. You need the hardest work." The cameras clicked furiously. Some people laughed awkwardly, unsure if it was a joke. But the children in the crowd leaned forward, their eyes wide, as if they'd just been given permission to dream bigger than they'd ever dared. As the podium ceremony wrapped up, Darius noticed faces in the crowd. Faces that had once turned away, that had once laughed at him. Now they avoided his gaze, staring at the ground or clapping without enthusiasm. The sting of their earlier words hadn't disappeared, but it no longer had power over him. He didn't run for them. He never had. On the edge of the barrier, the elderly woman in the red windbreaker waved her cowbell high above her head, grinning. "Told you, son," she shouted. "Run your race." Darius raised a hand in thanks, the metal cool against his chest. Later, as the crowd thinned and the adrenaline faded, he walked slowly away from the finish line. The town stretched before him, ordinary and unchanged. Brick storefronts, the diner with its flickering neon sign, children skipping ahead of tired parents. Yet everything felt different. He had won a race, yes. But more than that, He had claimed space in a world that had tried to push him to the margins. He had shown the children, and himself, that belonging wasn't given. It was taken, mile by mile, step by step, until no one could deny it. Until no one. As the sun sank low, painting the horizon gold, Darius turned one last time to look at the finish line banner fluttering in the breeze. His body ached, his legs heavy, but a smile spread across his face. Because he knew this wasn't just the end of a marathon. It was the beginning of every finish line yet to come.